Welcome, everyone, to Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter. I am a curator in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books and Manuscripts at the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. I split my time with the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies, which is a research and development institute in the Kislak Center, focusing on manuscripts, sort of broadly defined. I mostly do pre-modern manuscripts, but we do more modern things, Western and non-Western manuscripts. And Coffee with a Codex is one of my favorite programs that I do. And every week, I have an open Zoom call for about 30 minutes where I take a manuscript, sometimes more than one, off our shelves, and we do a little show and tell. So these are not manuscripts that I necessarily know a whole lot about. I think in this case, the first time I looked at this was earlier in the summer when I was doing a project on, I've been making collation models of all of these books, basically models on how they're physically structured. And this was one that I did, and I thought it was kind of interesting for some different reasons, and I thought it would be fun to bring it out. If you are new, welcome. If this is your first Coffee with the Codex, I'm glad you're here. If it's not, if you come back, welcome back. Feel free to interrupt me at any point in the chat. I'll keep my eye on the chat, and I'll just start talking, and we'll see where we go. So this is, let's see. This is a German manuscript. The record says that it was written in Austria or southern Germany between 1400 and 1475. I have reason to believe that it is on the late end of that date, and I will explain, hopefully at some point, why I think that. The binding, I don't think is the original binding necessarily, although it might be, it just occurred to me, it might be the original binding for this collection of texts. So let's take a look at the binding here. It's a 16th century, early 16th century binding. It's really pretty. It's sort of this, it's got calf leather. So it's leather over boards, over wooden boards. You can't see the wooden boards, but if I tap it, you can kind of hear it. And you can see, I guess you can see that it's sort of worn away a little bit on the corner. So there's some wood that's showing through the leather down here on the corner. The leather itself has been what we call blind stamped. So somebody has taken a kind of stamping tool and stamped the leather out into this kind of pretty design. So you have sort of roses in the middle and faces. Oh dear, that was a little piece of leather that just flew in the air. So a lot of that. It's a little bit worn, especially on the spine. But you got it on the back. It's quite worn. It originally had oops, let's see. Got to make sure you can see this. It originally had clasps here, and most of that's gone, but we still have a bit of the metal that was sort of held the clasps together. It probably would have been leather straps that went around. So that's pretty nice. And then we open it up. It is not the most beautiful manuscript you've ever seen, but I hope by the end of this, you will be convinced that it's still very cool anyway. It is written on paper. So definitely 15th century, because it wasn't really until, in the West at least, until the rise of the printing press, that people really started writing manuscripts on paper. So here we have the opening, the first page of the text. Sort of interestingly, there's almost a whole choir of blank leaves ahead, and there's more blanks in here, and we'll take a look at that. So the manuscript contains 3 texts, and I put the name of this session as poetry and prose, and it's 3 fiction texts in here. The first one is poetry, and then the second 2 are sort of prose narratives. The first text is let me see what it's called. It's a German poem in rhymed couplets on the life of Alexander the Great, and it's based on the Latin prose work Historia de Priscillis by Archpresbyter Leo. So it doesn't call it a translation, but it says it's a German poem that's based on this other Latin text. And the other two, which we'll get to, are also German versions of previous texts that were, I think, written in German. There is a sort of owner's mark here, 1854. So in 1854, let's take a look at what the provenance is. So, oh dear, Vienna, handwritten notation. So this was owned by someone in Vienna. And then before that, it was owned by P. Leopold Gruber who lived 1733 to 1807. And we know that because there is a book plate here. So we've got the book plate. And then how did we get it? I think we bought it in 1953. So we've had this since 1953 in our collection. So here's the opening of this Alexander the Great poem. And it is poetry, and you can sort of see that by the way it's laid out on the page. So you can see the pages have framing. So somebody drew lines. Let me see, I've got a new setup here. So I don't know if this is as good as my old one, but you can see that there are lines that have been drawn around the page that help the scribe keep this left-hand side of the page straight. So he just follows the line there, and that keeps it straight. The same on this side. And each line has a little bit of red in the opening initial. So you can it's sort of a poetic way of writing it. And then the different sections have these sort of larger red initials. When I look at this, I can just look at it and say, oh gosh, that looks very German, even before I look at it and see that it's written in German. German script has this to me, it's a very distinctive Gothic. It's a Gothic cursive, but it's very pointy. And especially if you look at these initials, they're just very, very pointy there. So this is this poetic one a little bit, and it's not pretty. There's no, I mean, aside from the opening initial, which I think it had a little bit of gold. So there's a little gold there, but it's a gold paint, right? It's not gold leaf, which tends to be shinier. It's sort of a gold paint instead, but a little tiny bit of bling. But it's mostly this black ink with a little bit of red rubrication, mostly on the opening initials, or the opening letters, I guess, and then the initials. And there's a little bit of decoration in the larger initials. So you can see here, there's a little bit, they've sort of gone in and added a little bit. And also over here, there's another little bit. And I put in tabs. You can see all my, you can't because of the screen, but I do have a lot of paper tabs here, marking places where I think sort of especially interesting things are happening. All right, no chat. A couple of people have come in, so I'm going to put the links in one more time. So there, did that work? Here we go. So there is the link, including the record for today's manuscript. And here is upcoming. There's some other things. Okay, there you go. So this is basically what this first text looks like. So you get a good sort of sense of it. Not very pretty, but well written for what it is, I think. So what is going on here? Let's see. There are some things sort of drawn in the margin. There are several examples of a shield that looks like this. So this, it's just a little shield. This one is red. I think there's one that isn't red, but it's sort of crisscrossed, and then it's got little diamonds in those crisscrosses. And I'm not sure, they all sort of have the same look. And I'm not sure if that is, you know, this a family sign, like a heraldry, or if it's just somebody making a kind of a fun decoration. But it does appear several times, which is kind of interesting. Here is an example of an initial that doesn't just have a little decoration, it's actually got a little fish. It's a recognizable little fish there in that initial E, I think. I can't even tell what that is. It just looks like it's a fish. So that's a little fun. So the scribe was having a little bit of fun while he was or she was writing. Oh, sorry. Let's see. I want to zoom out a little bit. There we go. And if at any point you want me to stop or slow down, and it's only, I'm only pointing it out because I noticed that later this got a little bit, it gets a little bit weird. The frame here, you can see the line across the top and then down the sides of the page. I mentioned that earlier. It helps the scribe sort of keep the text in the side, sort of one part of the page. But the upper line, the text is sort of, if you can see how that's, the line is sort of where they're aiming the top of the small letters. So the large initial, this is actually pretty fancy for this one. The large initial is sort of ignoring the line. And then you have an F that goes above the line and a D and a D. So the part of the letters are going above the line, but then mostly they're using it as a guide to sort of get the top of the small letters. And later on, it gets a little bit weird. So we'll keep moving here. Here are more. So these are, I said, I made a big deal about those, the shields. Now here are some shields that are doing something different. This one has a little red cross and this one has something else. And again, I don't know why this is. It may actually be a reference to what's happening in the text. I don't know. I don't think it's by the same person who made the other ones. And I don't know if it's original or if somebody added it later. The red, it does look like the same shade of red, but it could have been just somebody happened to have the same shade of red. So I don't know. It's pretty long. This first poem. I think I looked up a translation of the Latin, and it has 27 passus, so like 27 chapters. This, I couldn't find that our version actually kept to that, because it seems like the sections of this one are much shorter, given that we have a starting section here and then another starting section here. But that might be interesting to look through and see how those the different versions connect. Oh, I thought this was kind of cute. Down here, there aren't a whole lot of marginal decorations, but there are a few. Sometimes it's just sort of the decoration, and we saw it on the initials, on the upper initials too. So there's a sort of red and black pen work almost there, and you see it in the bottom, but down here, there's actually a little bird down there in the bottom, which is pretty cute. And it's sort of fun to think that maybe the scribe was just sort of making line work and saw that he could make a little bird there. And here is another one. This is more like, Oh, I'm sorry. No. Oh, come on. Why are you doing this? Hold on. Gotta fix this. Come on. There we go. Don't do that again. All right. I will, because I do want you to see this because I think it's pretty cute. But there is a little, if you can see him, he's way in the gutter. He's here in the gutter. The record says maybe that's a dog. I don't think it's a dog, but I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a hedgehog. It looks kind of like a hedgehog to me. But that was another one where I think maybe he was getting bored. I always think about the scribes getting bored and needing to entertain themselves a little bit while they're doing this. Let's see. Here is, we all love a good manicule. Here's a good manicule over here. It's got a nice little collar and a nice big, and I don't know what he's pointing at, something interesting there. And there's some more of this bottom blue and not blue, black and red decoration there on the bottom. Let's see, we are still here. Oh, here's another fish initial, but in this case, it's more like a zoomorphic initial, zoomorphic being an initial that's actually made to look like an animal, as opposed to having an animal drawn into it, which is what the other one I think was more like. So there's a nice one. Let's see. And here is another little guy down here in the gutter. And I don't know what he's doing. He's got some kind of note above him, or he's saying something. But I am afraid I can't read that, so I don't know. I don't know what he is commenting on. But that is pretty fun. And then I think we're reaching the end of the first one. Here is another manicule. There, another fine one. This one, he looks like he's got a puffy sleeve. I think that's pretty nice. And here's where I was mentioning this other, although this one looks like it was added later, this shield here. And this has the same sort of crisscross that we saw earlier. So maybe somebody reading this saw that previous one and thought this would be a neat thing to copy. And so they copied it. And there's more over here. There's another one, and that one's been broken. And I don't know what that is about. And we're almost to the end of here. And here we are at the end. And this is actually kind of interesting. If you see this red text here, this is a colophon where the scribe is signing it. And he's saying who I am. And his name is Hans Schwendt. His name is right here. You can see Schwendt there. His name is Hans Schwendt. And he's saying, I sign this. And so that whole part was written by Hans Schwendt, whoever Hans Schwendt was. And then we have some blank pages. And a blank. So this is sort of ends in the middle of a quire. And then we have these two blank, or actually it's four blank leaves, totally blank. And then we have pages that have been framed, right? So this is like it's like it's been prepared to be written on, but they haven't written on it. And that ends out that quire. And then we have a whole other quire, 8 leaves, that's totally blank. And then we start the second text, which is prose. This is the Erhard Gross's adaptation of the tale of Griselda, the Griselda legend, which is probably best known for Boccaccio's Decameron. And this looks different. It is these pages are not framed. There's no framing. We have this nice little blue and gold initial, which is similar to the one that we saw at the front. But I think that this is a different scribe, and I wish Amy were here. Amy is our cataloging librarian, and she's also a much better paleographer than I am. But I was looking at the shape, especially of the letter D's. And if you look, I'm going to try again to sort of come in on here. These letter D's are pretty distinctive. They're sort of straight up and to the left. So you've got the little loop and then straight up to the left. And here, and there are some that have little loopies depending on where they are in the word, but most of them look like this. And then if we go back here, let's see if we can find some. So here's a letter D here. They're much smaller. The D is smaller and shorter, and the bit that goes up is much smaller. And it also looks like, it's hard to say, like it looks different to me. Here we go. It looks different. Sometimes that looking different can just be because the ink is different, because obviously this is a lighter shade than this. This is darker ink, and this is a bit lighter. But I think what happened was Hans, what did I say his name was? Hans Schwendt wrote the first section, and I think somebody else wrote the second section, and then they were bound together in the early 16th century. So I think that's what's happening. So this, because it is written in prose, you don't have that sort of strong red, the red notation down the list. What you have is sort of more red being added in little bits. And so you've got underlined, there's some red underlining, and there's some red just sort of being added. There is a lot added to the first letter of the, not every single line, but some lines, but you also are seeing it more in the middle of that. And that is what that looks like. You're getting more initials. I think the initials also look different in this section versus the next section. This is sort of pretty up here. And this section also lacks the large number of marginal decorations that we were seeing in the previous section, where the scribe was sort of playing around with the black and the red and that kind of thing, and making little people. There's a little bit, so there's a little bit here, but it's not quite as playful, I think, here, which I think is another sign that it's a different scribe. The record says it's the same scribe, but I don't think it is. And I wish Amy were here. This is sort of a fun, I think that's a W there. Let's see. I do want to, here we go. So it's not framed, and then we start seeing a frame here, but the frame is weird. This is what I was saying. It was weird because what is the text is not contained in the frame. So you can see here, the first line is almost written on the line. That's the top of the frame. And likewise, if I scoot this down, you'll see the bottom line is written under the frame. And this is, I'm seeing this here. And also, although on this side, the text is actually contained in this line of the frame, if we take a look over here, the text here is not within the, it's within the frame, but it's like not up against it. It's a little bit inside that. And I don't know, when I saw this, I thought maybe the framing was even drawn in later, because here we have, here on the bottom, we have a line written under that line of the frame. And then if you look over here, this one is written on top of that. And so I don't know what's happening, but I think it's kind of neat. And it's telling us something about how this was written, although I'm not entirely sure what it's saying. But maybe someone who's watching this will, knows more and will figure out. It's just another kind of pretty initial. So this is what, if I'm right, and this is a second scribe, this is what they do with their kind of black and red decoration. I think it's not quite as nice as Hans. I think Hans has the upper hand on that. And here it's like they messed up the frame and then they were fixing it again. I'm not sure what's that. And then we don't have the frame again. And it's gone. Here's another nice big initial there. Let's see. And then that's the end. So that's the end of the Griselda. And then here we have our last one. And I think that this is the same scribe. I was looking at his Ds, and these Ds look like if I'm right, and there's two scribes. But this initial looks a little bit nicer. Maybe he's just trying harder. The third text is Euralius and Lucretia. And I was looking at this. This is a German translation of by Nicholas von Weil. And I was looking into this, and Nicholas von Weil translated this text into German in 1462. And this is why I said at the very beginning that I thought that even though the record says this is from 1400 to 1475, this one at least had to have been written after 1462, because that's when he made his translation. So if this is correctly identified and this is his translation, this part needs to be after 1562. But it also makes me wonder again about that first part, whether that was maybe written earlier and then they were bound together in the early, in the next century. I don't know. But I thought that was sort of an interesting thing to see. So here we have sort of some fun little smiley face added in this text down at the bottom. I know we're almost out of time, so I've got, this was the last thing that somebody had an oopsie here and spilled some ink, I think while they were, it was obviously when they were coming through. So the text gets written first in the black ink, and then somebody, either the same scribe or a different person, comes through with the red and makes the red additions. And it looks like they had quite an experience here. There's, on these two openings, there's quite a lot of spillage going on. And then not long after that, there's no more red. So about here, maybe 10 pages later, there's some on this page to the left, and then it stops. Because, and then there's no more of the rubrication or the red until the end. And then we get to the very end. So that's the end of that text. I don't know. It looks like it might actually, they might have just stopped writing. I don't know if this is incomplete or not. It looks like it might be incomplete actually. But then there's just, this is all blank now at the end, which is kind of interesting. So that is it. And we are at 12:30. So I am going to set this aside, but that was all of MS Codex 1077, which I'm going to share this with Amy and see if she agrees with any of my ideas about the dating and the scribe. Let's see. Oh, sorry, I saw that there were some questions. Let me see. Interlinear spaces. Oh, Bran is pointing out that interlinear spaces are bigger in the second part. Yeah, that's probably right. Good reference for 16th century German scripts. Look up Johann Nierendorfer. Thank you, James. Ink spillage is very cool. Yes. Appear perfect, but having that makes it more human. I agree completely. As soon as I saw that, I was like, I wonder how he knocked it over, if there was a cat or something. I always think there's a cat involved with that. Okay, so thank you all so much. This was really fun. And I hope that I'll see you again next. Oh, I will be here next week, but we have a guest actually next week. So I hope you can all come to that. But I'll see you again soon and have a great week.